Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for another Journey on the Fly, the podcast, where we have great discussions and the occasional monologue about fly fishing and life. And as you've come to conclude by now, when I say life, I don't mean just things in general, although those are important as well. I'm talking about worldview. I'm talking about philosophy. I'm talking about wonder. I'm talking about the appreciation of it that fly fishing gives us the opportunity to recognize and experience. And we hear that from different people's, really their lives, to sound redundant, but really from their backgrounds. And this week is no different. I am excited to introduce many of you to, and to some of you who already know who this gentleman is, a little bit more insight into who he is. Mr. Gary Kell, the fly fishing coach. This guy wears so many hats over the years that, well, I don't know how he has more hair than I do. He has taught fly fishing for years, hundreds of people of all ages. He's been fly fishing for over 50 years. Man, I'll be 50 in a year, and I think about that. It's amazing. It's so much to learn from somebody with that kind of experience. He's an FFI Master Certified Instructor. He's an instructor for LL Bean. He's a licensed guide here in our great state of Pennsylvania. He's authored some magazine articles in Fly Fisherman magazine. He's co-authored the Keystone Fly Fishing book, The Ultimate Guide to Pennsylvania Best Waters, which I'm surprised him and his other fellow guides are still alive with the information they've given away in that. Thank you, Mr. Kell, and the rest of you. I have very much experienced a lot of new water because of that book. Anyways, let's get into this conversation with Mr. Kell, and I think you're going to really like what he's got to say. And he's a super great, funny dude. All right. Reading some of your bio and stuff from your flyfishingcoach.com website, you know, I had mentioned already that you have been fishing for over 50 years. And I'm thinking about that because one of the wonderful things about being so good looking as I am, people think that I can't say that with a straight face, even on an audio, but people so many times think that like in my 30s, and I'm thinking like I got a year and I turned 50, and you've been fly fishing. You've been in the water that long.
Yeah.
I mean, give us some of that story. I mean, how did fly fishing find its way into your life, and you know, where did you grow up and all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm a Pennsylvania boy. I grew up along Lake Erie up here in Fairview, which is on the west side of Erie, and I grew up on a farm, so, you know, and I enjoyed the outdoors. I didn't fish a lot when I was a kid because we didn't have any good trout streams close. And I did fish the lake with my dad a little bit in the boats and in neighbors that had boats. Did a little bit of that kind of fishing, but I always enjoyed it. And I thought, gosh, I'd like to continue this. Well, you know, every year we would go to a lake in the Poconos, and there is where I kind of, quote, as a young boy, refined my fishing. I had a 10-footer bamboo pole, and we would rig that up with a bobber and a worm, and there I fished and, you know, gave the sunfish a run for their money. So that's really where I, you know, really developed my interest in fishing. And then when I went to college at Penn State, it was hard to ignore the fact that they had some of the best fly fishing around. And I, of course, cut my teeth on Spring Creek at Paradise. And they used to have a telephone line that was, that went along the stream there in Paradise, and I probably had the most fishing line of anybody on that hole, because at that time my casting left something to be desired. So, but friends of mine took the course in fly tying from George Harvey, and I tried and tried to get that course fit into my schedule, but I was unable to do it because it was even at that time, and that was in the late '60s, where it was hard to get his course, and it's too bad that I didn't. But that would have been something to remember, especially looking back now and understanding what a great person he was. But anyway, that's where I really started developing my interest in fly fishing, and from that time on, that's just about all I did. So early on, of course, with the worms and the bobbers, and I went through a spin fishing stage where I did a lot of spin fishing, and then it was there in Penn State that I moved from the spin fishing on to the fly rod. So
I have one question I have to ask you about George Harvey, because I'm probably going to forget to ask you later on. Not to purposely jump into like technical side of fly fishing, but I kind of get mocked at a little bit in fun ways because I still fish on a dry fly leader. My personal leader, I still tie all 6 or 7 sections of that Harvey leader that gets all beautifully coiled up on purpose. And he actually stated, I guess at one point, he thinks that that's his biggest contribution to the world of fly fishing was that leader. You have any thoughts on that as a master casting instructor?
Yeah, I definitely follow that his lead on that when I'm fishing dry flies. I've got a very simple leader that was described in the book Keystone Fly Fishing, where I wrote the section on the Northwest. But it's my view of that leader as I just take a base leader and I add pieces onto the end of a base leader to match whatever I'm doing that day, whether it be dry fly or nymph or whatever. But in a dry fly leader, for sure, you take the last 2 sections and you make them progressively longer to help to give that that good slack. So I still use that, and when I go to a dry fly leader, I'm still doing it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that alone is worth the conversation there, just because the season is upon us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What did you go to Penn State for?
I've got a degree in landscape architecture.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I ended up getting a job for a short stint in the Army, but I ended up getting a job with the U.S. Forest Service, and quite a few years of my career were here on the Allegheny National Forest. Oh. And I did have 4 or 5 years out west in Idaho and Montana. And that's when we were young. I just married and just graduated and headed out west. Pretty exciting times for us. And we enjoyed every minute of it. But it's probably a good thing that I didn't know then what I know now about fly fishing. I probably wouldn't be married, but it was a pretty exciting time out there. And then, of course, when you're having kids and family, you think, boy, their grandparents are, a couple thousand miles away, or maybe not quite that far, but and will they ever get to know them very well? So I had an opportunity to pick a job up here on the Allegheny National Forest, and that's what I did in 1975. So I came back here and spent the rest of my career here. So, yeah.
I mean, that's...
And
oh, good.
Had all kinds of jobs on there, but the most fun was, of course, being director of recreation here on the Allegheny National Forest. And it's 500,000 acres of public land with campgrounds and overlooks and trails galore of all types. And that was a great job. So,
yeah, we may not have the peaks that the western states have, but we, in my opinion, and I know I'm very biased, I think we have an incredibly beautiful state, and that part of the country up there is hands down some of the best of it.
Yeah, it's really quite nice. The West, when you talk about fishing, what I didn't like is the spring was usually so long that you never got to really fish until June or July sometimes, and then your season was pretty short. You only had 3 or 4 months of good fishing, and but here in Pennsylvania, of course, we can fish, and many winters, if they're not too tough, we can fish near year round. And then I think the fly hatches are more varied and stretch over longer periods than in the West. So I really do enjoy fishing Pennsylvania.
And so I got a question for you on that. So I had, I've got this client that he and I have become pretty good friends. He's been out with me, I think, 7 times, and every time he brings somebody with him. And two people ago, he had brought a gentleman that he was friends with from Colorado, and the guy gets out of the vehicle, and we're fishing Penns Creek down near Cherry Springs, and he says to me, "So how is this fishing like Colorado?" Now, I've never fished in Colorado, but I've read enough and watched enough and talked to enough people to be able to tell him it's absolutely nothing like Colorado. For one of the reasons you just stated, here's my question. Because there is a shorter season per se out there, especially with insects, and our season's longer, especially on our wild streams. Those fish seem to see a lot more, we'll just say flies and lines, where they become, as many of us say, educated, opposed to in Colorado where the season is short. Those fish are probably hungry coming out of that long winter, and there's more of them, obviously, especially like per capita anyways in the water.
Right.
Do you think that attributes to some of the reasons that fishing can be a little more difficult in our wild streams in Pennsylvania opposed to out west?
I think that's probably, in general, is probably correct. That they they see a lot of flies over a longer period and a lot of fly lines and stuff, and makes them a little more nervous. And so that's definitely probably a good observation.
Yeah, it just dawned on me when you said that, it kind of, every once in a while, like every 10 or 15 years, something clicks in my head. And when you put those two things together.
Yeah. Did I really think of that? Yeah.
So
yeah.
you've had a pretty busy fly fishing career. I mean, out of into retirement, and you've been around. So from out west to some other places, what do you think are some of your biggest challenges and most rewarding moments that you've kind of experienced in some of that time?
I'd have to say, over the 50-year career, one of the things I did that made quite a bit of difference is the casting. You think, I thought I was a pretty good caster, and I probably was in general terms, but when I entered this program of Fly Fishers International to become a certified instructor, I just learned so much about what I'm doing and casting and how I'm doing it that it just opened my eyes. Plus, it made me more successful, particularly for saltwater fishing and some of the warm water fishing. It just I think it expanded my horizons quite a bit and gave me more confidence to do some things, stretch out and do some things on salt, and going for muskie and pike and some other warm water species. And that was quite satisfying. And also I met a group of fly fishermen that they're just great people. And in terms of teaching, they love to teach. Many of them just do it volunteer wise, of course. And it just enriched my life so much. I mean, just the other day, a friend of mine, Kirk Klingensmith from Twin Tiers Club in southern New York there. He was down in Florida and attended some fly fishing seminar, and there was a guy I met, and pretty soon somehow they brought my name up, probably because Kirk was up north here, and he knew Steve, a guy I met quite a few years ago. Here they found each other and then sent me a picture, both of them together. I mean, and it's just opportunities I would have never had. I go to Florida in the winter usually for a while, and I take my little boat and fish. And I was going to check the roster on Fly Fishers International, and here there's a guy that was living there in the same town we go to in Crystal River. And I called him and said, "Hey, can you tell me about the fishing?" And what I ought to hear, it's a guy that I actually helped certify as an instructor, and I had forgotten his name because it was a while ago. And he says, "Oh, I'm guiding down here," and so we ended up getting together, and he'd take me out for redfish and snook and all that. So anyway, it's just how getting into something like that, how it enriches your life.
You described it that way, and man, I started that process just recently. I got my manual and I'm reading through it, and just the reading portion and understanding mechanics at a higher level or a deeper level, whichever way you want to put it, is already like humbling me. And I know that I already know where I kind of stand in that whole world, which is why I'm making the move to do so. But you are one of the very few, as far as I understand, in the state that are have the classification of master casting instructor. What was that journey like?
Well, at the time that I started this, I had joined the staff down out of DC. They operate out of DC for LL Bean, and they had a weekend fly fishing course. And I had just gotten my certification. Had to go up to LL Bean. Well, that's a tough gig when you have to go up to LL Bean. But anyway, the instructor, Macaulay Lord, gave us because I was kind of interested in teaching anyway, and I thought this course that he gave to help teach instructors and that was interesting, so I went up to take it. And shortly after that, I got my certification at the starting level. But that was pretty quick at the starting level. But the master's was another cut above that. So I worked at the LL Bean schools for about 3 or 4 years before. Well, that was previous to 2008 when we had the downturn in the economy.
Yep.
And at that time, the LL Bean stopped those because they're a cost center for them. They don't make money at this. They would bring people in from all over the place, up to about 16 people at this lodge down out of, what's this? Front Royal, Virginia. And that's where we would teach these folks. So I spent 3 or 4 years doing that. And that the instructors, we would practice casting afterwards. And so we all were thinking about heading towards the masters. And so we would do a lot of casting and that sort of thing at the time, and had a chance to be with other instructors. And that was pretty cool. But it took me probably, I didn't get really serious till about 2 years before I decided to take the exam. And then I worked pretty hard and met with several other casters, mentors. Jim Valley from New Jersey, we got together several times. He was one of my mentors, along with Macaulay Lord, and he was the LL Bean head instructor there. So, and both of them, they have different styles. We all have our own thing and the way we present stuff. But I learned a lot from both those mentors in casting. And then when they felt I was ready, and when I felt I had the confidence, I ended up taking the test, the certification test, uh, in 2008, I think it was, and I managed to pass it the first time, which was unusual at the time because most folks fail once or twice before they actually accomplish it. So, but it's not something you say, oh, this year I'm going to get my certification, and you go out for a month and you play around with your fly rod and look at the test and try it, and then do it. It's just unless you're gifted in some way, and I'm not that gifted. I have to work for it, and but there's a lot of satisfaction when you work hard and then you accomplish it. No matter whether it's the first time or the second time you take the test, it's still a fun accomplishment. So that's what I had to go through. It took me a few years to reach it, but I did finally reach it.
That's pretty awesome. You mentioned teaching a lot. What do you think?
Yes.
What do you think makes a good, we'll just say fly fishing instructor as general terms, let alone casting instructor? What makes a good fly fishing instructor?
Well, one is you have to be what I would say was a student of the cast. You really do have to study how a fly rod works, and how you need to move it to make it work, and the adjustments you have to make as you say get a longer line or a shorter line, and that sort of thing. So you have to really work on understanding the cast. That the thing that's different about a certified instructor from just somebody that is guiding and all that tries to teach somebody. It's identifying the errors and then knowing what to do to correct that error. And that's what most people, when I'm like helping in say a Trout Unlimited or any other club helping teach, quite often somebody will come up to me and say, boy, I've told them, stop your rod high and all this, and yet they still can't get a good cast. How come? And, they didn't know what to do. And a lot of guides, I don't there's a lot of good guides and good teachers, but you have to know what to do to correct mistakes. First, identify the mistake, and then how do you correct it? And then you have to be good with people. That's just no doubt about it. You can't say, "Oh, that was a terrible cast." You never say that. You say, "Boy, your stance is really good. That's just and the way you're holding the rod is really great. Now let me help you make this next cast a little bit better." And then you can get down to what they did, and then try to correct it. So this is fun. This is supposed to be fun for people, and so you gotta address it that way, and and you need to be prepared, especially early on when you're first learning to teach. You can put together typical plans for what you're going to talk about or address, and fill it out, and so that you don't go off on tangents and stuff. And you have to meet a student's objectives, and you need to talk to them before you start. Is what are they trying to get out of this session, and that sort of thing. So that's some of the things, and obviously practice teaching. You need to go in front of a mirror and practice, or go out on the yard and pretend you're teaching your uncle how to cast. He's never fished before, and he has an interest, and he wants you to teach him, or whoever it is. You should practice, and that helps to make you very smooth and believable in a session. You do things slowly. You demo slowly. You don't go out there and start cranking off 100-foot cast or something. That's just show off. But you need to demonstrate slowly, and so that the student can see you, Um, you kind of have to be a quick judge of people, whether they learn. Some of them want the details. There's the engineer. Hey, I want to know how this thing works. And so you can start to get into a little bit more technical language. But then there's the artist that you're teaching. You pretty soon find out he wants to watch you and maybe imitate you. And that's the way he likes to do it. And so you need to be a fairly good judge of people in a short time and how they might like to learn. And then take them through that in the way that they learn the most. So, there's that's one thing about the certification is, yes, you do need to perform excellently. I mean, you have to be right on the button when you are casting, but that's only half the test. The other half is teaching. And in fact, on the test, there are 6 or 7 teaching questions where you are asked to be the instructor, and maybe the person that's testing you will be the student. And so, that's the half of the test that some folks forget about. They of course like the casting part. They'll spend most of their time on casting. If they don't spend enough time on teaching, then they don't end up passing because their teaching is not up to standards. So before you start this, you got to understand that this is for instructors, and you're dealing with people, and you need to learn to teach in the best way you can.
That's some really, really, really good advice. Matter of fact, I actually feel like I'm cheating a little bit. Having heard that. I mean, honestly, there's things that you say that I'm like, okay, I understand that. And then there's some things that you were saying there that are really personally helpful, because I have a tendency, I absolutely, when I discovered that knowledge humbles me, I love knowledge. I absolutely love gathering it. But the problem on the other side of that for me is I regurgitate too much of it. And that is, I've seen that happen where people have walked away from me and their head's ready to explode. So hearing that as almost as a discipline, to find a way to say those things in a simpler way, condense it, be that was helpful. And obviously, and I don't mean to say this to pat you on the back, I say this for everybody listening to understand the amount of wisdom that comes from gentlemen and women like you that have been doing things like this and understand this world so much longer than I have or they have, to really listen and to get a clue as to what these things entail, especially in the world of guiding. You said 2 things that I not only agree with, but I think I try to strive for, which is you got to love people and you got to love to teach. If you don't have either of those, at least in the back of your head, you're going to be just a person that puts people on fish, and it'll frustrate the person the next time they go out on their own, because they're not going to have a clue, and it's going to frustrate you, I think. Because
that's true. Yeah.
Especially if the person's not catching fish and you're not kind of instructing and all that, or they end up in trees or whatever the case is. So man, I really, really appreciate that, Gary. That's good. Good advice.
Students also learn, once you've instructed them in a few items that they need to work on, you need to give the student time. Because the best learning is when you learn, let's see, how should I put this? Learn yourself. I mean, that the light comes on, the instructor, I'm just trying to feed you bits of information that will help you make a better cast. And when they do, and then when they're on their own and they finally come to it, they'll internalize that because they came to it themselves. And so oftentimes instructors get in there and just talk incessantly, and do this. Okay, let's do this. we learn that you should provide some information, just a few short minutes. I mean, if you're talking for 10 minutes, that's way too long. You talk for 2-3 minutes, give them 1 or 2 instructions, and then leave them alone for 5 or 10 minutes and let them practice that on them. And hopefully they'll come to that conclusion then on their own. And that sticks to them more than this incessant language that the instructor's giving you. Half of it you don't understand. So, so there's some tricks, quote tricks, or that really get you to a point where you're known as a good instructor. I mean, you've given them some key things to do, and then you've let them alone to find them themselves. So,
man,
it's neat to to watch that happen when you have people that they're teaching, and then all of a sudden something dawns on them, and they're there. Whoa, that works pretty good. So, yeah.
You also mentioned mentors, and as I've gotten older, realizing how important it is, because almost every one of the people that I have invested time with as friends for the last almost 30 years have been like 15 years younger than me. And that's not to say you can't learn from people younger than you. It's to say that I've always recognized wisdom in experience and age. But over the last 5 years, I've really been, to be honest with you, praying for mentors in my life, for older men and women who know more than I do, who will call me on the carpet, whether it's fly fishing or just life in general.
Life.
What are your thoughts on mentors? I mean, have you had some mentors in your life that are just priceless?
Oh yeah. I've had several over my lifetime, obviously, that have affected me in both my life as well as in fly fishing. And I've already mentioned a couple of them there earlier about my casting life. Those two gentlemen there had the most effect on me. And there's many others that I didn't work with often, but that have made an impression and helped me be a better person as well as a better caster. But I know, and you read my story about my life, you might say, how I came on to fly fishing that. But my good, he was both part. How would I put it? He's a mentor, but we were a mentor to each other. We learned together, and we're Christian men, and we both worked for the Forest Service, and we both just loved fly fishing, and we just did so much together in fly fishing. And we would, of course, discuss our lives and the happenings and things in our lives that. And he's still a good friend, and we talk pretty near every week, and so those are people that I can, the highlights at least of those 3 mentors who were very influential in both my second career, you might say, and life. So,
oh, that's good stuff. Well, you are also involved with Trout Unlimited, and I always ask this question in some form because if the fish and the fisheries are not available to us, well, you're just doing an awful lot of casting. What are your thoughts on how important and how involved the rest of the fly fishing community ought to be in conservation type of work?
Yeah, well, one of my philosophies and one of the reasons in which I teach and try to both teach and inform others about fly fishing is it's interesting how a person that may not know much about water and all that. They've never really studied it. They do something else. But when you get them into a fly fishing class and they begin to understand the importance of clean water and the life that goes on underneath the surface of a stream is just phenomenal. And most people just don't think about it. But when I begin to describe that ecosystem underneath the water that we're not really very aware of, but if you're a fly fisherman and if you have that interest and you learn about that, you become a conservationist. I mean, it's something you say, geez, I don't want that factory to be dumping stuff into my stream. And, I think it brings awareness to our responsibility to be stewards of what the good Lord gave us. I mean, that's just the way it is. And that's one of the reasons I teach, an underlying theme and that of why I like to teach and inform others of this great resource that we have. And so, I mean, that's important to me. And I teach. I mean, I've taught little kids, like first and second graders. A lot of people would shy away from doing anything fly fishing with a youngster or whatever. But I've taught as young as that and as old as 89, 90 years old. It's just so satisfying to see an 89-year-old grandmother who didn't think she was interested after we talked, and pretty soon she's out there grabbing the fly rod and giving it a shot. And then when we get down to the pond, she hits that pond with a vengeance, and she catches a big bluegill. And you should have seen her eyes light up. I mean, after that, she wanted to catch another one so bad she was flailing the water. She was so excited. And here's a person, 89 years old. It's just it's phenomenal. And the same sometimes with the kids. Although kids, I just figure you're planting a seed. Fly fishing's too difficult or complex for youngsters, and unless they have a really good mentor, I don't suggest they take up fly fishing. Hey, grab a pole and get a worm and go catch some fish. But when they get to a point where they can understand what you're talking about and then maybe implement it on their own, so somewhere around 14 to 16, they're old enough to begin to take off with it themselves if they like it. And if they've got a mentor, all the better. If their dad, their uncle, or whoever it is can be with them, then they can start much earlier. I've had fathers and sons, and the son's only 10 years old, but just so excited about fly fishing, you can't stand it. So some of those youngsters, they gather the information quickly, and if their mentor helps them along the way, they'll become good fly fishers and good conservationists and good stewards of our environment.
I love that. Well, you and a few other gentlemen, and it's not on purpose. I guess it's just kind of life making that happen for me a little bit as I meet the authors of the infamous Keystone Fly Fishing book. I always joke with you guys that I'm surprised you're still alive, because which is funny, because I think you and I talked about that a few weeks ago in Edison or something like that, there are no secrets. I mean, people, it's so funny. You'll be standing beside somebody, or you'll hear a story, somebody's fishing and somebody upstream's catching a bunch of fish, and you walk upstream and talk to them, and they won't share with you what fly it is, because I don't really know why they won't share. I guess they think you're going to catch the rest of the fish I don't know. But that book has provided, including myself, probably thousands of people access or easier understanding and access to so many of our beautiful streams in Pennsylvania. And I thoroughly appreciate every person that's put from Lenny to Rothrock to you and so on. My question, though, is where, and I'm not asking for specifics here, but when Mr. Gary Kell goes to fish? What is he taking with him, and is he have a preferred rig? Does he have a preferred method that he goes after fish?
Well, I'm kind of more in the quote, more the classic fly fisherman. I mean, what I mean by that is when I go out on a stream. Now, how I pick the stream might depend on um, the size of the water, what I'm thinking about doing that day, or maybe the hatches and which stream might provide us a hatch or whatever. I sometimes I just throw a nickel in the air over the map, and where it lands, I go fishing. And but I grew up under the method of early in the morning, you're going to fish nymphs. And of course, before I got to Euro nymphing, I would rig up, the standard Joe Humphreys type rig, and fish nymphs in the morning. And then, late morning, maybe depending on the time of year, you say, well, some of the blue quill ought to be active. So I would switch over to maybe wet flies for a while. And then as the day goes on, of course, you start to see a few pop the surface. So I switch over to the dry fly. And that's kind of a classic picture. I'm not one that, would say, well, I'm going to Euro nymph all day because that's what I want to do, and I want to catch the most fish possible. I'm past catching the most fish. I need adventure. I want to move along the stream. I want that sort of thing, and I want a little bit of solitude. So I might pick a place just because there's not very many people that fish that creek, and you don't catch a lot of fish, but there's some fish in there, and they're challenging. And I'm more like the challenge of moving through a small to moderate sized stream. I've got the Allegheny River in my backyard 2 blocks from here. I could be down there Euro nymphing through below a little pipeline, and maybe catch a 20-inch fish, but maybe not. But it's funny in the spring, even when the Allegheny River is starting to bring up these big brown trout, I'll be going off onto a stream to fish a mile a stream, just because I enjoy that kind of fishing so much. It's a casting challenge, and it's a challenge to find out where the fish are and that sort of thing. And I can maybe see some hatches start to develop. And so that's kind of my somewhat classic way of fly fishing. And I grew up on that, and I just really enjoy it. So I can't tell you that I do one thing all the time. I do know, though, early in the year, it's nymphs. I'm starting now. Like I could have gone fishing yesterday, and I would have Euro nymphed or taken my 10-car rod, and essentially it's a form of Euro nymphing without the hassle of anything else, and that, because they're, early in the spring, they're on the bottom, and so you need to find them if you want to catch any. So I will nymph quite a while, especially up here in the Allegheny. Our early spring hatches are few and far between. It has to warm up a bit before these fish start to move on wets and dries. But anyway, I do an awful lot of nymphing early in the spring, but as soon as I can break out of that way, I do. And so that's my story. That's just how I fish. This is sometimes we as fishermen, kind of look down on others the way they fish or whatever. But, you got to remember, this is recreation. Now, many fly fishermen treat it like a competition. And I'm sad to say the influence of competitive angling has made its way onto the scene. And so a lot of these folks are just into that. I gotta catch a bunch of fish. If I don't, I'm just no good. And but this is supposed to be a recreation, and you're supposed to enjoy it and take in all you can of the environment that you're in, and as well as the beautiful creatures we do end up catching. And so I'd say to some folks, slow down a bit. You don't have to charge in up to the top of your waders just because you bought them, and and get there. But that's competitive angling, and you know how they charge into stuff and get right in there, and they go like a windmill, round and around and around and around. Well, I guess that's fun, but it doesn't sound like fun to me. So, of course, I'm at the age where I can't charge in anymore. I don't like going. I stay below my waist for sure, and but that's a little snippet of my story anyway. But that's just my story. Everybody has to make their own.
Right, and that's good advice. That if nobody hears anything else you say today, what you just said in the last 5 to 10 minutes, 100% so important, because I see a lot of kids, younger generation fishermen and women get discouraged because there is that mentality that there's only one way to do it, and it's the way I do it, and that gets pushed rather than realizing, you know, in some terms, in some form of the way you said it, that there's just one tool in the toolbox to pursue fish, and it's recreation. Man, that is really, really important to hear, because so many times, I mean, you could go out and get skunked, but still, you should be able to still hold a memory and enjoy the day, because what's the old adage, you know, a day of fishing is better than, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, a day of work.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's times I get frustrated. I'll have my flies in the tree, and I got to stop myself and say out loud, Adam, you're fishing. Calm down.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well, do you have, I got two more questions for you. The one has to do with, do you have one of those, do you have a particular story that comes to mind about a particular fish that you pursued or saw, or maybe it was over time or something like that?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I didn't. Boy, there's so many fish in so many places and so many times. I do know. Okay. I mean, there's several fish. Fishing the Allegheny River is interesting, and you saw I did an article back in 2013 about the Allegheny River browns. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of fish that were kind of like that, because often you'll go up there and be on the river, and you'll see these fish rise, but you just can't get them. And there's been a couple of fish that have kind of, you know, the fish have been there, and I've been up there 2, 3, 4 times working that fish and couldn't catch them. Where, you know, finally I'd work my way up, and conditions would just set themselves up perfectly. And I can remember the one evening I had a fish working the shoreline just under a tree that was in the tail of this pool. And these fish set up at the tail, and they feed on the brown drakes and the sulfurs that hatch off the river in the course of obviously late evening. And they just will finally set up sometime between usually 8 and 9, and will set up in their lane. A lot of fish move as they feed on the Allegheny River. So they may be this spot now. 5 minutes later, they'll be 20 yards away in a different spot, and they just cruise. And those are the hardest fish to catch. But when one sets up like the one I saw, and I thought, boy, I saw that head and tail rise, and that's got to be a good fish. It looked like 2 feet between the tail and the head. So I worked that fish and worked it, and I believe I ended up putting on a sulfur that evening that I finally landed this fish. You know, I'd tried different things. I've got some believe it or not, the usual, if you're familiar with that fly out of snowshoe hare, and it looks like belly button lint laying on the water. There's really no. It's the craziest thing. Why that fly works, I don't know, but I have had it work so many times. But that evening, though, I'd switched over to a sulfur because there were quite a few sulfurs yet, and so in that case, it was probably a good 50, 55-foot cast to set up to get in the feeding lane, and you have to make a reach right afterwards in order to give you a long enough float that'll get in their window. But that night things came together, obviously, and or I wouldn't be telling the story. But, I put that over there, and it looked like it was going to drift in his lane because they don't move very far for the fly. That's got to be within a few inches of them. So I got it over there, and it comes down, and all of a sudden I see him just tip his head up. The fly disappears. And, I've been fishing 50 years, but you know what? Sometimes when that moment comes, you're like a little kid, and all you do is snap your rod, pull it right away from him. Well, that night, I guess, I'm not sure why, the good Lord just said, "Calm, Gary," and he took that fly, and then he went down under, and then's the time for the strike. So I didn't have to strike very hard. It just sinks right in their soft mouth. But and the fight was on. Obviously, they do a lot of running around, occasionally jump, but a lot of the big ones don't jump. So, but that was like a 22 or 22 and a half inch brownie, and that was pretty satisfying. But I have other stories very similar. I mean, but that was one I remembered anyway. So yeah,
that's a good story, Gary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh man. Go ahead.
I guess at some point, I should tell folks about the fly fishing school.
Yes, please. Yeah, I have one more question, but you tell them. You tell them about that first, because it'll be the perfect segue into my question. So please tell them about the fly fishing school.
Yeah, I started a few years ago, and actually this is something that came from my time with L.L. Bean when I taught. I was the lead instructor for 2 or 3 years there on the L.L. Bean school down in Front Royal. And so it's patterned after that school. I can't, I didn't create this from scratch myself. But anyway, I decided to start a school here for beginners. The problem, it's hard to get up to snuff when you're just starting out. You hear a lot from your friends, and everybody tells you this and that and the other thing, but it's hard to pull that all together. And then when you attempt it, sometimes it doesn't go very well. And that's often why people quit, is because it just seems too difficult. So I decided that I would try to set up a school that's primarily for beginners, and it's not for seasoned anglers or even intermediates. I say, though, that this school is for both ranked beginners who don't even have the equipment, and for novice, or those people that have been fishing maybe a few years but never had any formal training or formal course. And so that's who I'm after. And we have a school that limits it to 12 people, and we've got 3 or 4 certified instructors that will assist me in this school. We start Friday night with just equipment and get to know each other and that sort of thing. And then on Saturday and Sunday, we delve into fly fishing, and it will be. I don't go into, a lot of trouble with the courses that you get now at the fly shops and that is you always got these guys that are already fishing this and that and the other thing, and they want to know about the new knot and the new this and then how you Euro nymph and that's just too much for a beginner. So I've structured this course to stay with the basic aspects of fly fishing, and so it on Saturday we're outside casting. We're looking at aquatic insects. We're looking at where fish live in the stream and why, and where you might find them. We're just doing all kinds of things to help you understand what this game is all about and give you some of the language and try to explain it in the best way we can. It's very active. If we're going over equipment, I just don't stand up there and lecture. We'll hand the equipment out, let you feel it, fool with it, so you know what it's all about. I even suggest that people that have not started fishing yet, that you don't buy your equipment before you go, because I'm going to be giving you lots of good information on to help you understand what you might want to buy. And a lot of the stores give you quite a bit of help, but sometimes some of the stores don't have that many clerks that are real good, or they don't quite understand the game themselves, and they may not necessarily give you the right equipment for your needs. So anyway, that's one reason why I say don't buy your equipment now. Wait till after the course, and you'll know more about what you might want to buy. So anyway, it's so I've got equipment, and we will do all those kinds of things on Saturday. Then Sunday we start to head out fishing. You'll be setting up your own leader, tying the knots, getting it, depending on whether you want to fish a dry fly, a wet fly, streamer, or a nymph. You'll rig up in the morning. That's up to you, and we'll help you get going. I'm trying to, even though we'll go run out on the stream right away, but if the guy does all the work, ties all the knots, does everything, have you really learned anything? and so that's why we sit back and say, yeah, I know you're anxious to get on the water, but you're supposed to be able to do this on your own after this course. So we let them do it, get set up, and then we go out on one of the creeks here, depending on water conditions and weather. We'll choose a stream that we'll go out on, and then for 3 or 4 hours, we'll go with you and help you try either dry fly, wet fly, the streamer, or a nymph, and so you can get some on water practice. And in the event, we've had several people catch their first trout on a fly, which is for us as instructors, that's pretty satisfying. And so anyway, that's kind of a snippet of the class. It's held at Olmsted Manor Retreat Center, which is a Christian camp from the First United Methodist Church and the Methodist churches. And it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. It's in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest in Ludlow, Pennsylvania. And it's a motel. This isn't camping. This is a motel type rooms, and we've got a meeting room that we'll operate out of, and family style meals, and good meals, and the right price. I mean, you can check if you want, but there are resorts along the Delaware and all that. They'll be double the cost of what this is. And I think it's a great opportunity for folks. And this year, I know some of you, if you listen to these podcasts, Jack Barr will be one of our instructors. He's new on the scene, a new certified instructor. And this year, he's helping us get the word out, and we'll be there to help instruct as well. So we've got a lot of great people, and they're really nice people that you can ask them anything, and they're very good to you. They don't have any arrogant bone in their body. So that's the story. That's what's coming up, and it's on starts May 2nd, which is a Friday, and ends 3-4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. So.
Well, that sounds like an incredible time, Gary.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I was coming up there, but man. Now you also do. You're a relatively full-time casting instructor as well. And are you guys doing the I forget what you called it. I'll call it the fly casting games, where you have the different the silver, bronze, gold. Are you doing that this year as well?
Yes, our club, our Fly Fishers International chapter down in Franklin Oil City area, Keystone Fly Fishers, we're offering, and this is a nominal cost. I don't know what the cost is for sure this year yet, but we've already put out some information about this chance to kind of have fun learning more about casting. It's not a, there's no, you go on your own paces, I guess is what I want to say. You learn at your own pace. You can start out, we can help you figure out where you need to start, because we've got the bronze, silver, and gold levels of casting. And we'll spend one or two Saturdays preparing and letting you cast and giving you some direction as to what to do to get better. And once you accomplish certain, like in the bronze level, they've got a number of tasks that if you can do those tasks, you're at the bronze level, and you can get a certificate if you like that sort of thing, that you completed the bronze level. And then you can work on the silver level and finally the gold level. Once you get to the gold level, if you were so inclined to like to teach and go further, the next thing you might do after the gold level is start in to be a certified instructor. So you should have pretty good skills by the time you get to gold level.
Wow.
So yeah, that's happening. Oh boy, I don't have the date in front of me now.
Well, what I'll do in the show notes of all this, when I get it out and share it, I'll make sure I have all the links and means to find all this stuff available to people. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I know it's in June. So there's 2 Saturdays in June where we do this. So.
Okay. Well, my final question for you is, so you've been fly fishing all over the place for decades. You talked about your early days with a cane pole and working as a coach where you are in the schools. Where do you see the future of fly fishing headed? And you can be as honest here as there's no restrictions, good or bad, because I think it's important for us to hear. Where do you see our sport heading?
Oh gosh, I don't know. And what I do, I meet so many different people, but a lot of them are just looking for a way to kind of get away from it all. Our lives are pretty tense, and and to get away is harder and harder. Now, I don't know whether this will happen. What I would like to see is to have people get more involved in the out of doors. And I think in some ways it's going that way, because I hear those stories to people that I get to the weekend school about, why they're doing this. And so I don't know whether that, and there's also a fever about competitive angling now because of most of the storied people on that you see in Facebook and all over and at the shows are competitive anglers. And so I see kind of those two offshoots growing, maybe side by side. There's nothing inherently wrong with competitive angling, but I think it takes it a little more out of the recreational side and more into competition, which is nerve-wracking in and of itself. And I think those fishermen, Josh Miller would agree with that. It's just, and so would George Daniels. He would agree with that. He's preaching more slow down fish, and that sort of thing. I know, and because that competitive angling can really get old fast. And but as long as there's those two branches moving, I know, and they can go back and forth. Competitive guy that really wants to catch every fish in the brook and it isn't happening unless he does. And pretty soon he says, "Oh, this is exhausting. I think I'll just have fun." But I think, that's growing. I know in people I see, it's just finding something that people can do. And it's a social sport. Not everybody goes out by themselves. I mean, sometimes I enjoy doing that, but I also like to have company. And so it is a social network. And so, husband and wife enjoy things together. And I think, and I hope, and I see that growing somewhat. It used to be, it was the guy, they did all the, no, the women didn't join him or anything. Now we've got a significant increase in women's initiatives and getting outdoors and learning about all of these sports. And fly fishing is a great one that I help at a lot of the women's events across Pennsylvania that Amity Daniel kind of led that story on introducing women to these fishing sports. So, and it's a great program, and so I've got a lot of my fellow anglers now that I know a lot of women that fish. So it's a great thing. And if husband and wife or father and son or mother daughter, I've had all those combinations at the schools and in my private lessons. And so I'm not just hoping that both those branches grow together and feel free to move back and forth if they would like to. So I don't know. That's all I can think of as I look at where the sport's going.
No, that's very insightful, actually, because I do a little bit of the competitive angling, but I do it they probably actually get upset with me when I show up because I don't get there for the points. I get there to purposely put myself in a slightly stressful situation to show some of my deficiencies. Like I'm terrible, if I'm overall in my whole entire life, I'm not that good with time management. You give me 2 hours to catch a bunch of fish. I get caught up on that one fish that's underneath the log for half of my time. And I look upstream and I've got, 100 yards of riffles and runs I haven't even fished yet. So yeah. And but then I could back out of that and then just sit along the stream and just enjoy watching eagles fly over or, fish rising somewhere. So I'm kind of okay with both of those things, but I can definitely see it's an unbalanced issue, right? You go one way or the other, right. and things aren't fun anymore.
Well, you standing there working that fish under the log, did you think about the anxieties you have back home, or whether it be your business or your job? No,
a good point.
That's gone. You don't think about anything except, boy, that's a nice fish. I really want to catch that fish. I think that's healthy. Now, if you put time on something, that's another stress level. So you have to watch in fly fishing. You don't put time limits on stuff. If I don't catch a fish every 10 minutes, I'm not doing well. So then instead of focusing on the beautiful aspects and the prey and the predator and all this other stuff, but you start put time limits on it. That's where you get into higher stress levels and that sort of thing. So I think you're doing yourself a favor by sinking into an issue there and just, I've got nothing but that big fish in my mind and trying to catch it.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that an awful lot.
Yeah.
What a great conversation with Mr. Gary Kell, master fly fishing casting instructor. There's an awful lot of wisdom there. 50 years of being in the water. Friends, I hope I make it to 50. Man, I am excited to, and out of respect for Mr. Kell, to begin to call him a friend. I don't know him that well, and he doesn't know me that well, but what a genuine, wonderful man. Thank you, Mr. Kell, for your time, for your effort, for all the people that you've instructed in fly casting. And friends, can I just encourage you? I don't care if you've been fishing 2 months or if you've been fishing 50 years. If you've never taken a casting instruction, please do so. Please look up Mr. Kell or look up my friend Jack Barr. Avail yourself to these events, to these schools that they're doing. There is nothing better than having somebody help you learn. And YouTube and self-taught isn't good enough. It just isn't. You don't have anything objective or anybody objective to help you make better movements and understand what's really going on. And it's going to enhance every experience you get from then forward. Woo! I'm excited about doing these. I really am. And I'm so grateful for every single one of you that are listening. And I hope that your journey into life and fly fishing just keeps getting better. And I hope that these enhance it. So if it does, we ask you, wherever you're listening to this, leave a review. Leave us a good review, an honest review. It helps the content get out there. We don't make any money at this, maybe one day, but we are looking for sponsors if anybody's willing. I want to throw one more last thing in there. Please visit our website. We work with an organization called Cross the Divide. I am the Eastern Fly Fishing Coordinator, and we work with active duty, disabled, and retired veterans. And we take them fly fishing. We teach them this wonderful sport about the fish and the environment and casting, and we help them engage with each other in group settings. We do single, just one-person outings. We do family outings with them, and it's 100% free to the veteran and anybody participating. So we're looking for people to sponsor, to help. Go over to my website, journeyonthefly.fish. Pull down the window and you'll see Cross the Divide. All the information is there, and if you have any further questions, give us a call. We want to continue to keep saying yes to these men and women. Thank you. Remember, till the next time, it is not about the destination. It's the journey that makes you. God bless.